our first guest speaker, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Paul Nowak. Paul has been an active trade unionist and campaigner throughout his working life. He first became a union member when he worked part-time at Asda as a 17-year-old. Paul worked in a call centre for Cheshire County Council's bus information line in the late 90s after working on an agency contract in a BT call centre. He also worked as a hotel night porter. Before becoming a trade union official, Paul had always been employed on temporary and agency contracts, so understands the insecurity of never having a permanent contract. Paul was a member of the first intake of the TUC's Organising Academy back in 1998, alongside Sharon Graham, now the General Secretary of Unite, and Ros Foyer, the General Secretary of the Scottish TUC. Aged 26, he became an organiser for BIFU, the Financial Services Union, now part of Unite. In 2000, Paul joined the TUC staff, later becoming Regional Secretary for the North of England and subsequently Head of Organising, reporting to the General Secretary. In 2013, he was appointed TUC Assistant General Secretary, and in 2016, Deputy General Secretary. At TUC, it's longer than speech. At TUC, Paul led the campaign against the government's plans for regional pay in the public sector, introduced the Lead and Change programme to develop the skills of senior trade unionists, and worked closely with member unions to defend public sector pensions. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Paul led union efforts to improve the government's safe working guidance, and with significant success, ensuring millions of workers had a safer environment to work in. He supported Francis O'Grady in securing furlough and led efforts to support for the cultural industries and aviation transport. Paul, a warm welcome. Please address our conference.
Well, Martin, Fran, delegates, it's an absolute honour to address your conference for the first time and to bring solidarity from everybody at the TUC, our 48 unions, 5.3 million members up and down the country. Civil servants, yes, but also shop workers, teachers, paramedics, factory workers, security guards, carers. Millions of workers in different unions, in different occupations and professions, all united by shared values and shared goals to fight and to win for working people. I want to start by saying a few words of thanks to Martin, your new president. He's someone I've stood alongside at platforms and picket lines for many years on Merseyside. And to Fran for making such a huge impression as your new General Secretary, the first woman to hold that post in the 130-year history of PCS and its predecessor unions. Now, after nearly a quarter of a century, Mark Savotka was always going to be an incredibly hard act to follow. But Fran, I think you've done PCS and our whole movement proud. So thank you both for everything that you do. I want to thank everybody as well at PCS who made our national mobilisation in Cheltenham in January such a success, not just commemorating the 40th anniversary of the dispute at GCHQ, in which your members played such a prominent role, but bringing the whole of the trade union movement together to deliver a clear message to this government. We will unite to defend the right to strike. And finally, let me just thank each and every PCS activist, not just in this room, but up and down the country, because it's the work that you do that makes a difference to hundreds of thousands of workers in the workplace, doing the disciplinaries, the grievances, keeping people safe. PCS members who are doing the jobs that the public rely on, whether it's collecting the taxes that our public services desperately need, keeping our borders safe, or ensuring that some of the poorest, most vulnerable citizens get the benefits and the support they need. Whether it's DVLA or the Passport Office or everywhere in between, you and your members are the people who keep Britain running. And it is only right, therefore, that your members should get a fair deal for the work that they do. That's why the TUC will continue to be behind your calls for decent pay, decent pensions and job security. And it doesn't matter whether it's in the civil service or the Border Force or ONS or G4S services, the pensions regulator, Heathrow Airport or anywhere else. We stand unequivocally with PCS members campaigning, balancing for industrial action and taking industrial action, because if you win, we all win. So solidarity, comrades, to everyone. And listen, we'll also work together to resist the Tories' attacks on our civil service. The civil service unions and the TUC together fought back Boris Johnson's proposals to slash 90,000 civil service jobs. We were successful then. We are going to fight tooth and nail against Rishi Sunak's plan to cut 70,000 jobs to fund increased defence spending? How do you know it's a bad idea? You know it's a bad idea when Jacob Rees-Mogg, I can't even say his name. Jacob Rees-Mogg thinks that this is excellent policy making. This is far from excellent policy making. These are back of the envelope proposals that will damage our public services, undermine our democracy and do nothing at all for our national security. They must be defeated, and I'm sure that if we stick together and fight together, we will defeat those job cuts as well. Conference, I want to focus the bulk of my remarks on the TUC's key priorities for the year ahead, about the need to secure political change, on why we need a new deal for workers and what we can do to rebuild our own movement. Before doing that, though, I think it's important to recognise that we are part of a global trade union movement, a global trade union family, and we live in an increasingly dangerous and volatile world. Just last week, I was in Ukraine, meeting Ukrainian trade unions, and I saw for myself the terrible situation facing the public there and working people. Surgeons working through air raid sirens, power workers coming under direct bombardment from missiles, transport workers who keep the trains running. But as well as war in Ukraine, we have war in Yemen and in Sudan and elsewhere. We've seen the rise of far-right and authoritarian governments right across the world, and of course, we see daily the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And by any measure, what we are seeing in Gaza is appalling. Indiscriminate bombing, children starving, civilians targeted. Last month, the headquarters of our sister trade union centre, the PGFTU, was bombed by the IDF. That's a trade union headquarters, but it's also a bakery and a nursery for 380 children. So today, let's reiterate the calls of the global trade union movement. A return of all hostages, an immediate ceasefire, respect for international law, and a recognition that the only route to peace lies in a two-state solution built on a safe and secure Israel, but crucially, a safe, secure and free Palestine. Conference last year was a momentous year for our movement. We had a cost of living crisis that hammered families, public services on the brink of collapse, and a Tory government intent on attacking our right to strike. But I think we can take collective pride that in the face of all of that, we fought back. Hundreds of thousands of workers stood together, campaigned together, took industrial action together, and won together. Across the private sector, we won hundreds of victories on pay. And in the public sector, from education to health, we won much improved deals. In the civil service, you won historic concessions from a government that started out the year saying that there'd be no new money and no new negotiations. And you forced them back, not just a pay rise, but that £1,500 cost of living payment. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because your members campaigned for it, fought for it, voted for action, and took action. And that was replicated right across our movement. In the last year, I stood on more picket lines than in the previous 20 years at the TUC combined. Not because I wasn't doing anything for the previous 20 years, but because from physios to people working in bakeries to people working in museums, workers stood up and said, enough is enough. I was proud to stand alongside PCS members striking at the pensions regulator here in Brighton, at Liverpool museums, at the British Museum, and those incredible outsourced workers in ISS, working in civil service departments, fighting for fair pay and for fair recognition. They were all examples of the difference that strong, effective trade unionism makes. But politics also makes a difference. And I think if 2023 was momentous, 2024 is going to be even more important. A general election is coming. We don't know exactly when. It could be as early as July, but we do know this. And you've just reflected this in the debate you've just had at conference. As we get closer to polling day, the Tories are going to go further and further into the gutter. Attacking trade unions, scapegoating trans people, demonising migrants, using culture wars to divide workers. And I think in the face of that division, we have to be absolutely clear when that election is called, we stand with all workers and we stand for decency, unity and solidarity for all workers in this country. Your Safe Passage campaign shows there is a humane alternative to the government's disgraceful migration policies. An alternative that doesn't involve PCS members being sent to Rwanda to do the Home Office's dirty, unlawful work. And I think we need to remember the key point is this. Those culture wars that the Tories are playing with are just a desperate attempt to distract from their failures on public services, on wages, and on living standards. This is a country where literally nothing works anymore. Hospitals in crisis, social care on its knees, sewage on our beaches and in our rivers, railways in chaos, wages lower now in real terms than they were in 2008, and our civil service, the glue that holds our society together, run down, denigrated and attacked on a daily basis. This is a country of public squalor and private affluence, a country of haves and have-nots, and the Tories have laid waste to this country. It says everything about their values, that instead of trying to fix those deep-rooted problems, they've spent the last 12 months, 2 years, attacking our rights at work. Reintroducing tribunal fees that the Supreme Court has already ruled unlawful. Again, trying to allow employers to use agency workers to bust strikes, again previously defeated in the courts by our unions. And imposing those minimum service levels that will remove the right to strike potentially from 1 in 5 workers, including your members of Border Force. And on minimum service levels, let me just be absolutely clear, conference, as our special congress at the end of last year was very clear. If any employer is stupid enough or reckless enough to issue a work notice requiring people to break their own picket lines, we will stand by the side of any worker and any union in the firing line. We'll stand by you with your judicial review, because we are clear, as you are clear, that these laws are not just unfair and undemocratic and unworkable, they're likely to be unlawful as well. But the key message we need to send to every government, every politician and every employer is this: we will defend the right to strike, and we will defend any worker who exercises that right to strike. That's a commitment from the TUC and the whole of the trade union movement. And MSLs are a perfect example of why we need political change in this country. And that is the TUC's first priority this year, to vote out one of the most right-wing, most incompetent, most anti-union governments in our history. And so whenever the election comes, whether it comes in July, in October, in November, we need to be ready to organise, ready to get the vote out, ready to fight for jobs, wages, rights and services. Now, I don't take anything for granted. Labour are ahead in the polls, but it'll take an historic swing just to get a majority of one in the House of Commons. And I'll say this up front. I know not everybody in this room is going to agree with Labour on every policy and every issue. And the PCS, just like the TUC, is not affiliated to Labour or indeed any political party. But the choice at the next election will be clear in Westminster. 5 more years of the Tories, or a Labour government that will create a new publicly owned energy company run in our interest, that will bring our railways back where they belong, into public ownership, and has promised to deliver the largest wave of public sector insourcing in decades. And above all, a Labour government that will deliver a new deal for working people. And there's been a lot of speculation about this in the press over the last few weeks. Let me just talk you through my thoughts on the New Deal. This will be the biggest expansion of workers' rights in our generation. And my second priority for the TUC this year is making sure not only do we get a change of government, but we get a Labour government that delivers the New Deal for workers in full in the first 100 days of that Labour government. Banning 0 hours contracts, banning fire and rehire, delivering day one employment rights, giving unions new rights to access workplaces, repealing the anti-union legislation, the minimum service levels, as well as the Trade Union Act, and introducing new fair pay agreements. As I say, delivered in full in the first 100 days of a Labour government taking office. And my message to Labour is very clear. Ignore the siren voices and the whingers in the employers' organisations and the employer community who oppose the New Deal. These are the people who opposed the national minimum wage 25 years ago. They said it would cost 1 million jobs and ruin the UK economy. Guess what? It didn't happen. So the employers were wrong then and they're wrong now. Deliver the New Deal and deliver it in full. And that New Deal accompanied by a broader package of change, an economy that actually rewards work rather than just wealth, where we use smart industrial strategy to deliver good green jobs, and where we invest in the public services that we all depend on. And that requires fair taxes. Now, I am glad Rachel Reeves has heeded the TUC's call and PCS's call to invest more in HMRC. They've made a commitment to invest in HMRC, to close the tax gap, to collect the missing billions, to get tough on the tax cheats. But we can go further, and we need to go further. So at the TUC, we'll continue to make the case for equalising tax on capital gains with taxes on wages, and for wealth taxes that the rich can't dodge. Instead of cutting HMRC staff, now is the time to invest in HMRC. Now is the time to tax the wealthy who can afford to pay. So, securing political change, winning a new deal for workers, but also a third clear priorities, because whatever happens at the next election, you, me, everybody in our movement needs to work to build a stronger, more diverse, more inclusive trade union movement. One that is growing, that is thriving, that can win for workers. And this is the challenge. Because last year, despite all the industrial action, despite all the wins, all the victories, all the headlines, our collective membership went down by 200,000 members. That's just not sustainable. It's a particular crisis in the private sector. And the problems aren't new. The problems that have been around for the last decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. Not recruiting enough young members, not organising enough workers in the private sector, including those outsourced from the public sector, and still not representing the full diversity of our membership. So the best way for us to grow, the only way that we can grow, is by being more diverse and more inclusive, so we look, sound and feel like the people that we aspire to represent. That means taking forward the work of the TUC's anti-racism task force and fighting racism. It means fighting for our disabled and LGBT plus members. It means tackling the scourge of sexual harassment. Yesterday, Fran and I signed a joint letter with Prospect and the FDA calling for an inquiry into sexual harassment in the Ministry of Defence. And just let me make this point. Sexual harassment has got no role in any workplace in this country, and it's got no role in the trade union movement either. And our job, and this is a message for the brothers more than the sisters, it's our job to make this movement a zero-tolerance environment for sexual harassment. Because our values, solidarity, equality and dignity, aren't an optional extra. They are at the heart of everything that we do. Let me finish, Martin, with this thought. I know, talking to your members, talking to members across our 48 unions, standing on those picket lines, visiting people in workplaces, these have been some tough times for working people. I was struck last year, my first couple of months as General Secretary, going up to a mental health hospital in Blackpool, staff doing an incredibly difficult job in really challenging circumstances, waiting for the food bank to come around on a Thursday because they couldn't get by on the wages that they earn in the NHS. So these have been really, really tough times for far too many people. But I think they're also very hopeful times as well, because change is within our grasp. Not just political change at the election and at the ballot box, but the possibility of fighting for and winning economic and social change too. The chance to build a fairer, greener, more equal country where workers get paid decently for the jobs that they do, have security at work, where everyone has access to great public services, and crucially, where we have a strong trade union movement that wins for all workers. Let's take that opportunity. Let's build our own movement. Let's win for workers. Solidarity Conference.
Thanks very much, Paul, for your support, your solidarity to obviously our union, but also to our members, because you're right, you've been on picket line after picket line, and to show our appreciation, no expenses being spared, mate, we've got you some lovely gifts to take away with you.
Thanks all. Cheers.
You'll know what it is. It's a jar of PCS honey, a PCS water bottle and a PCS Palestine badge, but it's what we do, innit? Yeah, you wish. Whiskey, yeah. Okay, no, seriously, thanks very much, Paul.